when Alex says it's not a media company and when I say it's a media company, what we fundamentally mean by that is that we don't want to be driven by page visits and advertising. This was the driving factor for us to start writing. Besides the fact that we wanted to showcase what we were thinking about and our passion for geospatial, this is what has kept us going, because we believe that there is a better way of communicating geospatial to the rest of the world and geospatial to geospatial experts as well. And we don't believe that way is the way that the traditional media companies within the space have done.
My guests today are Muthu Kumar and Aleks Buczkowski, who are the two people behind the Geoawesomeness website. For a bit of context, Geoawesomeness started in 2011 by Aleks, and then soon Muthu joined, and since then has become basically one of the go-to resources for geospatial content online, which now has a lot of people contributing and writing to the website and has amassed millions of page views over the years. To me, the craziest part is that they've both been able to build that while keeping full-time jobs. As someone who's trying to put content out there alongside having a full-time job, I wanted to understand a little bit better about how they managed to do it, but also how they managed to do it for so long. They've not only built a community of people who read and consume their content, but also people who are engaged and create some of their content online. Behind the scenes, they've also been great supporters of the podcast, and I wanted to understand a little bit better about that and kind of how they're thinking about, let's say, the media landscape in the geospatial world. Before that, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, which is, again, Element 84. They've been sponsoring the show, and I'm really thankful for it. Element 84 is a geospatial software engineering company, and they work mostly with large-scale impact projects. So I think one of the best examples of that is how they've taken the Sentinel-2 optical imagery and they've worked to put it on AWS, Amazon Web Services, to make it a lot easier to access. I've had Dan Pilon, their CEO and co-founder, on the podcast at episode 16, so you can head there. I'll put that in the show notes or description to listen to more about how they're thinking about the company. With all of that said, here's my conversation with Muthu Kumar and Aleks Buczkowski. Know how I start these. So I'm really happy to have you guys on the podcast. I'm quite excited to talk about Geoawesomeness. But yeah, you guys know how I start these. I like asking people how they would describe themselves. So I'm curious to know how you guys would describe each other as well. So yeah, Aleks, how about you get started? How would you describe yourself?
Oh, I'm Aleks Buczkowski, founder of Geoawesomeness blog together with Muthu. And this is what I do after hours. But during my daytime activities, I'm a director at PwC, working also in geospatial industry, because I lead PwC Global Center of Excellence in Drone Technologies, which is also kind of exciting thing to do during a day. And now, how would I describe Muthu?
I was going to ask about that as well.
I would describe Muthu as a very good friend with whom we've had amazing journey over the course of the past 10 years.
Yeah, Muthu, how would you... now the bar is pretty high. You know, you can't say like, oh, working with Aleks pretty hard and all that stuff.
So how would I describe Aleks? I guess, I mean, of course, Aleks is a very good friend of mine. We've known each other for more than a decade now. We actually know each other even before we started working together on Geoawesomeness. So I guess good friend is definitely on the books. Another term that I would use to describe Aleks is very geospatially sound, in the sense that he's always able to think about what comes next and what will be the next trend in geospatial, what will be the next development in geospatial. That's one of the things that Aleks is quite good at, quite gifted at.
And you can't evade the question. Like, I want to hear how you would describe yourself as well.
The answer that I'm a good friend of Aleks was not good enough. Okay. I guess that's a bit more simpler for me. How would I describe myself? So I'm one of the many people who keep Geoawesomeness going. That's my, let's say, geospatial connection. I am somebody who likes to build communities. I am somebody who likes to bring people together. And I work on Geoawesomeness during evenings and weekends and whenever we find time. And what I do during the day is working as a system architect for the German railways, for Deutsche Bahn, trying to digitize the railway operations and making railways more competitive in the European market.
Now, the question I wanted to ask you guys is, how do you describe Geoawesomeness? What is Geoawesomeness? Like, because it's something that you guys do on the side. If you're, at Christmas or you're with family, with friends, like, how do you describe the work that you're doing at Geoawesomeness and what Geoawesomeness is?
Let me maybe go first, because I had one of the most interesting experiences when I tried to describe what we do to a friend of mine who now is one of really good friends of mine. The first time we met, and my former roommate told her, he's the guy that I told you who has a blog. And I explained to her what we do. She could not understand what we are working on and why people would read the blog. And she said it to my face. She was like, so let me understand this. You write about maps, you write about geo stuff, and people read it. Why? This was every surveyor's dream, I guess.
Yeah, I can add to this. My wife always says, "Oh, you guys only rewrite the internet." Like you are looking for some news and information about maps, and that's your comments, and like you basically write the internet. Who would go for it? But somehow, over the course of the past 11 years, I think that like close to 14 million people visited the page. So no, it's a number that keeps astonishing us. I mean, it all started as a small website that I started to write as a student. And then somehow organically it grew to a bigger project. You've asked what it is. I mean, we keep discussing it with Muthu because it's hard to define really what it is. We wanted to be a community of geospatial professionals. We wanted to be a bridge between the geospatial people and non-geospatial people who could benefit from geospatial data and technologies. And we are slowly getting there, but I would say organically at its own pace. And where we'll be in the next 10 years. I mean, or 5 years, or maybe a year. It's probably hard to say, hard to judge. But one thing that is certainly clear for me, that, and I hope for Muthu as well, that this is something we do for fun. This is something that we do for all of these years after hours, something that we do not really for profit. No matter where it leads us, I think that the journey to get there is what keeps us going and being excited about Geoawesomeness.
Yeah, like Alex said, it has evolved over the years, and that's what I like about Geoawesomeness, that we started out as a website, as a blog for young graduates to showcase their passion for geospatial technologies and to showcase what competitive edge they bring to the table for any potential employer who might be interested in understanding what these geospatial professionals are up to. And it now is a community platform for everyone and anybody who's interested in sharing their opinions and expertise with the rest of the geospatial community and with the rest of the world, regardless of whether that's written directed at geospatial experts or whether that's written and directed at non-geospatial experts. And regardless of whether that's even written content, I mean, whether that's podcasts like people from you, Maxime, or Aravind and Daniel and the many others who are producing podcasts, or whether that's videos. So we just wanted to be the platform where people can get to know the geospatial industry, get to know the people behind the geospatial industry, and have fun while we are at it. Because of course, Alex is right. If we did not have fun doing this, we would have stopped it many, many years ago. I guess that's what's kept us going as well.
I want to go back to the early days. So 11 years ago, that's 2011. And if I understand correctly, you first started at Alex, and then Muthu, you joined about a year after that. So Alex, let me ask you, what prompted you to start that in 2011? Like, what was the landscape like, and what made you decide to start writing?
So I guess that I would link the first thought of starting a blog to something that a professor at university told me. He's a very smart guy. He told me that if you want to succeed with your career in the geospatial space, you can have two paths. I mean, you can be a really good engineer or a data scientist or developer and just focus on technology. Or you can be the guy that actually understand the products, the landscapes, the how things work, the market, the people, and so on. And I thought about this, and I realized that I will probably be the latter. So I started to read all of the industry news, follow events, and so on. And I realized that I really don't like what I read in geospatial media back then. I mean, these were basically very boring websites. And on the other hand, there were these cool tech blogs that were really entertaining to follow. So I thought that maybe there is actually a room to do something like this for the geospatial world, for the geospatial community. And I started to write, I mean, on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. And somehow I realized that, I don't know, maybe like a first 100 people read it, but someone actually read it, someone commented. I was able to have people discussing about some topic, and I realized that maybe there is a potential to do something more with it. So I've reached out to a couple of friends from university and the general audience. And one of the people that reached out to me that he would like to contribute was a young student from India with whom I've met on geospatial conference in Munster. And we started to talk to Muthu more often, and somehow we became organically partners in this whole journey. But one additional motivation that I had back then was also to increase my chances of actually getting my first job, or first real serious job in the geospatial space. And I can say that I succeeded. Actually, I got it through contacts that I gained when blogging, and actually since then, probably every major job change that I had was somehow related to Geoawesomeness. So I can say that it worked.
Right. And then, so yeah, let's go there a little bit. Like, what were some of the impacts? Like, was it like finding new jobs, but it was also getting new skills at writing, about being better at expressing yourself?
Maybe not about expressing myself, but certainly it was about putting together all of these pieces of information that I had about the industry, all of this, little news that I've learned here and there. And I've learned to put it all together in a way, in this, let's say, analytical way, combining different facts and commenting and understanding to some extent what are the driving forces for the industry, for different products, what are key limitations, bottlenecks, challenges, and so on. And this is certainly something that I've learned while doing it.
And so how did like you mentioned you guys met at a conference? How did that partnership start working together? Were you already looking for people to come in and contribute to the blog, Alex? Because right now you guys say you have a community, you have also people who write for you or for Geoawesomeness. How did that kind of get started, moving away from like an individual writing and then to opening up to other people?
So I literally reach out to friends from university initially. Also, like young geospatial students, or some of them not so young. Sorry, guys.
Not anymore, at least.
Not anymore. And invited them to blog from time to time, to write, to comment, to help their careers as well. And the idea was always, first of all, that this is not gonna be a media organization or anything. This is a blog about geospatial technologies, about geospatial stories and ideas. So I really invited everyone who wanted to contribute, to write, to do that. Perhaps initially it influenced the quality of the writing as well, because we are trying to professionalize this as well.
Can you expand a little bit on that? Like, what do you mean?
I mean that if you've got a bunch of students writing, you will not have the same quality of content that you have on Wired.
Right, I get you.
So coming back to the story, so back then this was a platform for anyone who wanted to contribute to do that. In the same way, Muthu started to write and contribute, and I was contributing and writing. And still today, we are actually inviting anyone who has some ideas to share, to do that via the platform. And this is why we call it a community, or a community platform, because we want anyone who has something to say to use the platform, to leverage this platform, to do that. Of course, right now we are trying to do it in a more professional way, to actually bring more value to the community, to decision makers, and so on. But the principle is still the same.
And how was it that for you, Muthu, joining the Geoawesomeness in the early days?
Immediately when I met Alex, so we actually met, the first time we met was in Münster in Germany, where Alex was organizing a student conference called Geomundus. And I was one of the students presenting at the conference.
And by the way, there is also a Geomundus conference happening, I think, this year. So I invite anyone interested. I think it's in Lisbon or in Castellón, Spain. So if you guys want to check it out, I invite you to do that.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. That sounds pretty good if people want to check that out.
Yeah, it's one of the, I mean, it's a student organized conference, so it's very accessible and very interesting to attend as well. I don't really remember how I came across Geomundus, but I wanted to, I presented the research article that I was working on together with my professor to the conference, and basically, first of all, they were surprised that there was a submission from India, because the conference itself is in Europe, right? I mean, back then it was in Germany. And long story short, I went to Münster. That's when I first met Alex and met everybody else who was there. And it was many, many months later when I realized that Alex actually has a blog. And I was like, wait, I've seen this face and this guy somewhere. And then, of course, a couple of Google searches later, I realized that we actually had met in Münster. So I reached out to him and expressed my interest to join his team, which was back then 5 members strong. So it was Alex, Rias, Ike, and 2 others that I think was it Stefan? I don't remember. Anyway, so it was 5 members strong exactly at that point of time. So I reached out to Alex because Alex was the one that was blogging the most. The others were not as frequently blogging as Alex, and Alex anyway was the contact person for the blog. And yeah, he was, let's say, very, very open and happy about having a 6th member, so to speak. That's how it started. So it was right around the end of 2012, the beginning of 2013, when I wrote the first article. And by the way, I've read it a few times, and I cannot believe that, this is what Alex means when he's talking about the professionalism of the article. If I wish I could take that article away, I would definitely do that, because after a decade of writing, I recognize the difference between. Well, you get better at writing. You get better at conveying what you would like to convey, and that clearly shows over the. I'm not saying that things that I write now are always good or even better than what I've written in the past, but you certainly see a difference in the way you approach a topic, the way you convey what you like to convey.
So that's where I'd like to go a little bit more on the editorial side. Alex, you mentioned when you were starting, it seems like the media landscape didn't really scratch that itch for you. So how do you guys decide what you want to focus on, what you want to write about? Do you have specific subjects that lined up, and then how you want to explore? Like, what's that process like for you?
So I guess that we didn't really professionalize it to have like the full editorial calendar for many months ahead. Normally we look at interesting things that are there in the industry, stories that we would like to share, podcasts that we are listening to, and that actually inspire us about some specific topic or technology or anything else, and we draft a brief and try to do some research. So maybe this is where we try to be kind of more consistent and professional, to actually understand what do you want to tell in the story, rather than just starting describing some of the stuff. And yeah, this is how we go. Although we are starting to explore other opportunities. So for example, we've got this project called Earth Observation Hub, where we basically invest a lot of time and effort in writing high quality content about Earth observation. And this is also where we invite sponsors to actually sponsor some of the content for us, to give us freedom to spend much more time and effort and have professional proofreading and so on professional support, basically, in creating such content. So probably this is where, over the course of maybe last 1 or 2 years, we are starting to professionalize a little bit the process as we are maturing.
I mean, Alex spoke about how we've improved, or let's say more professionalized, the editorial process, but fundamentally in terms of choosing topics and deciding what we would like to write about, that really hasn't changed since the very beginning, because fundamentally it's all about geospatial technology or location technologies, as long as it has a spatial component and as long as it somehow connects back to what you can do with geospatial data or geospatial tools to change the way businesses work or transform the way society works, then we go for it. This has been, like, let's say, the driving factor, and this was also one of the reasons why the old website was so cluttered in terms of the content, in terms of the categorization, because we had content on drones, we had content on Earth observation, we had content on trajectory mining, we had content on spatial data analysis, we had content on GIS. So it was kind of difficult for a non-geospatial person to navigate themselves on the website. And this is also one of the reasons when we redesigned the website, we decided to make it a bit more accessible for also people who don't necessarily know geospatial but just want to understand it better. So yeah, bottom line, if it has a geospatial component to it, then we usually go ahead and write about it. I mean, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, when you've had the number of people who have written for Geoawesomeness like we've had, which is close to 200, I think the really accurate number would be between 175 and 180. You can't really put a lid on the topics that you want to write about, because the whole idea of Geoawesomeness is that it's a community platform, right? So then you have to give the freedom to people to write about what they would like to write about. And as long as there is a spatial component, we were more than happy to support that. And we still are more than happy to support that.
Maybe there is also one more important thing to say, because at some point we figure out that we need to post something every day. I don't know when it and where it really came from, but we thought that if we want to be a blog, we need to have really a lot of content. And over the years, we've realized that it's actually not true. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to publish when we've got something to say, and we've got interesting stories to share with the community. So sometimes it may be every day, but sometimes it may be every week or even every 10 days or so. So we don't push ourselves to just publish any content. We really want to focus on original stories, something that will bring value to the community. And this is kind of the key focus that we have for the past, year or 2 years now.
Yeah, you mentioned, Alex, like you guys don't have the ambition of being a media company, but for people who are just doing this for fun and don't want to be a media company, it seems like there's a lot of thought and a lot of process that goes into that. Like Muthu, you're talking about like redesigning the website. Like this is a pretty big endeavor, getting people to proofread, things like that. So how are you thinking about Geoawesomeness as well, where it seems like those things do require time and money, but the way you're talking about it, at least, is it's not a business. So how are you guys thinking about that? I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
When Alex says it's not a media company, and when I say it's a media company, what we fundamentally mean by that is that we don't want to be driven by page visits and advertising. Because this is, this was the driving factor for us to start writing. Besides the fact that we wanted to showcase what we were thinking about and our passion for geospatial, this is what has kept us going, because we believe that there is a better way of communicating geospatial to the rest of the world and geospatial to geospatial experts as well. And we don't believe that way is the way that the traditional media companies within the space have done. What we want to achieve, what we want to do is more be the Wired, the TechCrunch, the Verge of the geospatial industry. Not necessarily copy the template that they have provided, but rather the in-depth engaging articles that Wired does, the more relaxed, laid back, consumer focused, technology focused enthusiasm that some of the articles from The Verge has, and focusing more on entrepreneurship and new ideas like TechCrunch does. And you don't see that in the geospatial media landscape. And this is the fundamental differentiation for us when we say we don't want to become a media company. That, and of course, I don't think neither me nor Alex have any ambitions of becoming editors who are, staying up late in the night and deciding what gets published the next morning. This is just not us. We are more focused on engaging, networking, and publishing whenever we want, rather than having to stick to a rhythm just for the sake of it.
So maybe one additional very important thing is that we are not journalists.
Yeah, that's another thing.
We are actually engineers, right? So we work in the industry during a day. We like to write, share stories, and just have fun doing this after hours. But for now, at least, we don't have intention of doing this full time or starting up a media company, because we like actually working in the industry, and rather than writing about this, just kind of being a part of it. And this is probably also what makes Geoawesomeness a little bit different, because when we write a story, we have a different level of understanding of the technologies and different components and the whole ecosystem behind this. And this allows us to go one step deeper or 10 steps deeper than a journalist would do. And this is probably what makes us also a little bit different than any other media that you can find or read.
Yeah, this is something that I've put a lot of thought into as well, about how important I see staying, like, working as an engineer, as a product manager, or whatever you want, but like as someone who's building something, rather than I'm going to put huge quote marks around just reporting on it. But I feel like there's something that's very different when you're also in the trenches. Also, you have a stake in building that. Is that something that you've been very adamant about keeping? Like, has there been a moment where you've thought, like, should we go full time on this? But has that aspect of, like, you want to keep one feet in the world of building things, not just reporting?
Well, if Elon Musk were to call us and say, hey guys, here is 50 million euros, go full time, I'm not going to say no. Or at least I don't know if Alex will say no, but I'm guessing no. We're going to take the offer and we're going to go full time. But let's be honest, that's not going to happen, because he's probably not yet aware of the awesomeness of geospatial technologies. Yeah, I mean, we've had conversations over the course of, I mean, when you do something as long as we've been doing it, you definitely have this conversation. So we've had this conversation, and I think fundamentally we really enjoy building geospatial products or being end customers of it, which is the case for me right now since my switch to Deutsche Bahn a couple of years ago. But we're still connected to the geospatial industry. We still get to see, and we are impacted by the developments of the industry. And that's something that's still very exciting, and that's still very much difficult to walk away from and say, right now, I'm just going to be reporting on what happens. So it's a bit of indecisiveness, I guess. But on the other side, it's just because how awesome it is, to be able to influence how these things are shaped, rather than just being it's the difference between somehow being a meteorologist and predicting the weather, and just being the person who reports it the next morning. Even if you are somehow very, very capable of understanding the predictions, but it's still a lot more fun, I guess, to have one foot in the door where you can still analyze the data yourself and understand what it means. if that analogy makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know, Muthu. You would be. I know that you would be a great weather lady.
I thought we agreed we are not going to comment on my weather reporting skills.
There is something tempting in the vision of being a blogger, living somewhere in a nice place, nice and warm place, and enjoying your life, and having fun, surfing, and so on. This is probably what people envision when they think about bloggers. But on the other hand, there is something really tempting and challenging in working in a company environment, or like in our case, together with Muthu, in a corporate environment as well. And it's really, I guess that our learning curve in our daytime jobs is still high enough and challenging enough for now to keep us doing this, just because of the challenge that and ambitions that we have. If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because I go through those same questions as well, about like having a full-time job and creating stuff on the side and talking to really cool people and in a way reporting on it, but not feeling like a journalist either, but an engineer at heart. So no, it's really interesting for me to hear your feedback as well. And you guys have been doing this for much longer than I have.
But you certainly fit the profile of the surfing blogger, right? I'm not sure
Yeah.
if that was part of the charm or not, but yeah, I think in the end it depends, right? Because the reasons why this has worked so well in terms of Geoawesomeness is not just because of the difference that we have with traditional media companies in the space, but it's also a collaborative effort. I think I've been thinking about it a bit. I mean, at the beginning, you asked me to describe Alex, and I said, what I admire about him is the fact that he can spot trends and he knows what's coming in the future. But for some reason, one of the trends that he spotted was that that open source and collaboration have more value than closed communities and gateways. So he could have had this blog that he started just as something for him to express his own views, and which is what majority of the blogs are. I don't know that many blogs even outside of the geospatial industry that are a collective effort by different people rather than just the personal space of one person. So in that sense, I think that also made this dynamic a bit different. So if we were considering going full-time, then it also essentially meant that either both of us would do it or the other person would have a very clear reason not to do it. So in a sense, I think the fact that we have such fun doing it together and that we still get to have corporate careers and exposure to the geospatial industry kind of made going full-time less interesting, at least so far, because we're having fun at it. So there was nothing that was really stopping us. We did not necessarily see a lot of benefit turning ourselves into a full-blown full-time employee. And another aspect of it is that once you go full-time, that it also means that you have to monetize it at a much higher target at a much higher level than you would normally do. So that's also something for you to consider, I guess. Yeah.
Can we go into that a little bit on the financial side? Like, this is something that I'm very curious for many different kinds of projects, but on the media side, I find that especially interesting because, well, that's something I'm exploring as well. How are you guys thinking about that? Like, one of the things that you mentioned is EOHub, which is a partnership with Up42, if I understood correctly. But you also talked about sponsored posts, things like that. Like that is starting to work with other companies. How are you guys thinking about that?
If you are doing this for money, it might not work because it's a lot of work and you never know if you will get any revenues. It's a little bit. I mean, it's like it's like being an entrepreneur, right? So you actually cannot predict really the revenues, and we never really cared about making money, but we slowly started to realize that companies see value in what we do and that they can put a price tag on it. And I mean, initially we were putting probably really low price tag because we didn't really realize that there is some value in it. And with time, we started to realize that we can actually that we deliver significant value to these companies. So we started to go in partnerships, like with partnership with Up42, and have sponsors of events that we are making, and so on. Have some banners on the website, but important thing is that we actually invest probably nearly everything that we are making on the website, like back into redesign, into being able to pay writers or proofreaders or graphic designers, like video editors, and so on. From time to time, we are able to buy ourselves some nice gadgets, which is fun, or meet in person, which is another thing that we probably should talk about during this podcast. But if we would be making this and thinking about this as a business, this would surely not be fun anymore for us. There is some fun in making money and understanding that you actually generate this value to companies. No, certainly, and we want to always do the best job. We are far from really exploring the full potential that is out there, and we want to do that better in a way that it's also like fair to the community. We never push any press releases or anything like this that could harm the community. We are still learning how to do that in a best way.
I think what you mentioned about reinvesting things is the way I've thought about it is like you start doing this because you really like it, but then you realize, if I do this, I could make it better as well. You're talking about like proofreading or designers, I think is a very good example, because writing is one thing, but making very good designs, for example, is a completely other thing. And yet that really helps a lot. Then you realize, I probably, if I want something good, I have to pay someone to do it. And then that makes the process better. So that, at least that's the way I'm currently thinking about it as well. And it seems to be a little bit the same for you guys, about like continuing to make it better and then bringing in money for that process, because I enjoy it so much. I want to make it better than what I can do on my own. It seems like that's how you're thinking about it as well.
That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is that money in itself is also a means to do good, right? One of the things that Alex and I feel very, very passionate about, and that's one of the reasons why I've been working on Geoawesomeness for so long, is that we truly believe that this technology and what we do has the ability to transform the world for the better. One of the biggest challenges that we face as a society is climate change. And when you look around, one of the biggest tools that we have as a society, as a species, to tackle it is geospatial, is Earth observation, is data analysis, all of those things together. And when you look at it, there are already organizations that are doing real good using maps. Two organizations that we have supported and we continue to support over the years is Humanitarian OpenStreetMaps and Map Action. And there is a lot we can do in terms of, creating awareness for their work and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, these organizations need money as well. So that's the other aspect of it in terms of raising revenues through Geoawesomeness, that we realized, okay, there is the potential for us to be able to, financially support, even if it's as little as €1,000, but financially support these organizations. Or even, the other day I was talking with members of Ladies of Landsat and Sisters of Saar, and we were discussing something as rudimentary as, hey, there is a colleague of ours from United States who is looking to go to a conference, but she cannot financially afford it. Is there a way that we could do something? And then I realized, hey, if we had enough revenue that we could establish a travel grant where we could support people on a regular basis, because this is something we did in the past, where we had one of my former alma maters where we supported people to go to conferences in India and things like this. So that's the other aspect of it. So I think it took us, I don't know, Alex, 7-8 years before we realized that, raising revenue, raising money isn't necessarily evil, doesn't necessarily mean that we are selling out. Because that was I think the existential challenge we had, because it was kind of easy to see the value of what we were doing for companies. I mean, it's not just creating awareness; it's much more than that. It's helping them understand the needs of the community, the needs of the market, connecting them to the right people, driving the conversation. This is what we do through the online meetups that we do. I mean, they're all sponsored events, but at the end of the day, it feels very much like a community event, because the company gets to understand the needs of the industry, understands the needs of their customers better, and people who attend also gain more information and knowledge about what's happening. But to get to that point where we really understood that we're not necessarily selling our souls and somehow violating the principles of community building by raising revenue took us a while. And I see that you struggle with similar challenges, and I was really, really happy when you wrote this long blog post describing how people can support you and what this means. But I was also shaking my head because you felt the need to actually explain every single detail. You felt the need to say, this is really what it costs for me to maintain this endeavor. What you do is of value to the community. What you do is of value to the industry. And what you are selling, you, Maxime, with your podcast and advertising to companies, is a way to connect with an audience that they would have not necessarily been able to reach. Is a way to communicate the benefits of their product, the benefits of what they do to an audience that they're probably not reaching today, or not probably reaching in the depth and reaching in kind of detailed understanding. So essentially, you are helping them, better communicate to their end customers, and that's of value. That's fundamentally how marketing and advertising works. The fact that you feel that you have to explain it is the dilemma that we face for many years, and I kind of understand it's a personal journey for everyone. But if I wish one thing, it's that more people who are, let's say, self-organized, independent media, as you once termed it, realize the value in what they're doing. And as long as you're not commercializing it completely, as long as you're not just inviting people onto your podcast for the sake of advertising, for the sake of big bucks, which is usually what happens, when people realize that they can raise revenues, then very quickly 80-90% of the conversation becomes about how do I generate revenues and how do I get people to pay more for my services. And this is the trap. But on the other side, if you find the balance, then it's totally worth doing it. And I see no reason why you have to justify the cost. I think that's kind of clear to everyone. I struggle with it myself. Alex struggles with it as well. But I think in the end, what you do as the podcaster behind mind behind maps has value for both the listener and the company that's sponsoring it as well. And you have to just accept that money is part of the transaction.
Yeah, let me jump in on that, because so at least for me, the reason I do that is not for the company, it's for the listener. And this is why I ask questions about like are things funded, because I think there's a lack of understanding and transparency about how things make money, how companies make money, and how projects make money. And I think for a lot of things, we have a lot of expectations that things should be free. And I think overall there's a misunderstanding of what things cost to produce. And that's especially true for media. I think another example is like mobile apps. Just people expect that they're free. And anything else is out of the norm, and it creates these weird business models that actually aren't necessarily in favor of anybody. And I feel like the reason I'm doing that is I want to be transparent towards the people who are listening, not necessarily for the companies about like, this is what you get and things like that. Like, I think that's important. But for me, it's creating that trust about like, look, I have advertisers, and I'm going to charge money for it, and I'm going to try to charge more and more as I go. And this is why, because I think these things take a lot of money, as we're seeing here. But I also want to make sure that transaction about like people give me their attention, give me some of their time for these conversations, that is understood by listeners, because we understand it because we're on the back end of it, and we make those deals with companies. I think if it's written or if it's a podcast, it feels like it's a little bit the same thing. But I feel like talking about it with other people around me, not necessarily everybody understands that. A lot of people don't understand how much work it takes to create those. And not everybody's going to go on that page and read that page, but it's more about like the people who will be. I want more of those pages about like, okay, how does this make money? How does Wired make money? We were talking about those. Or The Verge, how do they make money? And why do they do that? Why is there not a subscription model? I'd be happy to pay them. I subscribe to things like The Economist or some private newsletters, and I pay some content creators online. But I feel like having a diversity of business models also allow these things to go into the future, like to work over the long term.
Wired does have a subscription model, by the way. The Verge doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. And I guess the template, in that sense, the fact that Wired also has an advertising side to it. And that's kind of also what encouraged us to have this journalistic collaboration with Up42. With Earth Observation Hub, because we essentially realized advertising is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that what is it that we fundamentally want to do? You know, we want to create content that enables people to understand the industry better, whether that's a geospatial expert or whether that's a non-geospatial expert. We want to build bridges between the two worlds. And this is costing a lot of energy. This is costing a lot of research. This is costing a lot of time, fundamentally. Plus all the professional services that you need when you want to really create content of a high professional value. So one way of financing that would be advertising, right? Essentially, you go to companies and tell them, hey, I've got a platform. You can reach out to people. The other way that we are lucky that, you know, Up42 decided to jump into this idea that we had was to say, okay, you've got an idea that you want to build this platform and try to connect people on both sides of the world when it comes to Earth observation. That means that you need financial support to go and create that content. And so let's do that. So it's not an advertising deal, but rather a collaboration where they support the work that we do. So that's the other half of the, I mean, we've had conversations as well where I, essentially told you we're looking to encourage conversations with different people in the industry through podcasts. And if there is a way for us to financially support that conversation to happen, then we're going to do it. It's not because we believe that the person who's going to be on your podcast is essentially going to sing our praises. More often than not, they don't even know us. But there are conversations that need to happen. And if it's not happening because of financial reasons, reasons like, hey, I can only produce X number of podcasts a month, and if I need to do the 9th one, then I would need to hire an audio editor because I just don't have the time. Then let's make that happen. Or, Ladies of Landsat and Sisters of Sara are now, taking over Seen Above Earth podcast, and they have their own struggles with how to get time to work on it and to find video editors or audio editors, whatever. So that's the other part of the equation as well, that where I believe that we want to get into more, enable conversations, enable content to be created, whether that's through advertising or whether that's through direct partnership.
Yeah, that's one of the things I thought you guys were doing, which is really cool, which is like not just growing Geoawesomeness, the brand, but like it seems like the mission that you're on of let's make geospatial more accessible in terms of information, at least. I've been like I have a lot of respect for what you guys do on that side.
Yeah, I learned it from Alex, to be perfectly honest. And I don't say it because he's my friend or I've been working with him for 10 years, because there have been many a times when I've had a slight hesitation to choose for, let's say, more openness and more collaboration. And in that sense, since the very beginning, I think he's been the one who's been for more collaboration and more openness than you might decide at a juncture. So at some point when you have to listen to the same person for a decade, you kind of get used to it, and then you start speaking in the same tone and voice. So in that sense, I absolutely learned that from Alex.
One of the things I wanted to ask you guys is, you mentioned very fairly, Muthu, that geospatial is a really important part of today's society. A lot of the technologies are like that. There's a lot of tough conversations that need to happen about what we can do with geospatial and what we should do with it, what we shouldn't do as well. Is that something that you think about as well, about like having a critical eye about what is capable with location data, for example, when in times of COVID, or like just a lot of things around privacy? Do you see a sense of responsibility towards like touching some of those topics, or bringing in people who can talk about those topics that might not be super easy to talk about? I'm very curious to know how you deal with that, for the simple matter of fact that I also wonder sometimes how to tackle some of these questions.
So this is, I mean, there are stories that needs to be told in the industry, right? And it is not always easy to tell them. If we are doing it in the right way, it is not always the case. We would love to do much more and tell much more of those stories, for sure. We are trying. I guess we are trying our best to have these conversations. The challenge that we always have is limited amount of time, because I mean we spend on the project 2 hours a day, like on average, right? So maybe 8 hours a week. So we cannot tell all of the stories, and which is a bit of a challenge.
That's right. Do you have maybe like examples of times where you've thought about this? Like, should we talk about this or not?
Not, I mean, so your question was basically if we had thought about whether we should be an active participant in some of the difficult conversations that the geospatial industry has to have, whether that's surrounding data privacy, whether that's surrounding gender equality and things like this. I don't think essentially Alex or I never had a conversation where we said, hey, this is a topic we should not touch. There was once an incident where Alex wrote a sarcastic article about the Earth being flat, which ended up becoming an internet sensation.
That's amazing.
And I had to basically tell him, I don't necessarily believe that people get that sentence where you were being ironic. So then we had to add essentially, but I mean, that's the one thing that comes to my mind where I actively called Alex and said, hey, this is perhaps something, I know that that we were being sarcastic, but apparently the Flat Earth Society didn't get the memo. But yeah,
I'm typically always so much fascinated by the technology itself that I probably try to focus and always think about benefits.
Right.
Rather than thinking about risks associated to using it. The risks, they are obvious, and frankly speaking, I don't know how to tackle them very often, or there is no easy to do that. So I always prefer to focus on how this technology could be used for good to make life better or to make place. So we probably have a lot of conversations with Muthu about still being fascinated about the technologies and sharing some really cool new stuff, rather than thinking about risks and some consequences of these technologies. Maybe it shows that we are still in our early fascination days with the technology, which is cool after so many years.
Well, that's one aspect of it, and the other aspect of it is that there are people who do it better than us. I mean, Maxim, you've had one of your first guests was Dennis McKenzie, and she has this initiative where they were basically looking for good examples of how location data and location data ethics can be presented, and we were supporting. I mean, Dennis is really amazing. She's definitely one of the people who has made Geoawesomeness better, and I've learned a lot from her. And so essentially, when she was already working on it, it felt like it was not a conversation that we needed to repeat. So we just amplified what she was working on. That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is that luckily for us, some of the more negative and destructive aspects of location data and location data privacy gets picked up by larger tech organizations and tech blogs. I mean, Wired wrote several beautiful articles on the risks of location data, and they even had a recent article where they interviewed a couple of researchers who came up with a way in which mobile phone operators don't need to know where you are, because fundamentally every SIM card is tracked, and that's not needed. And they wrote a research article about it first, and this was picked up by Wired, which explained what it is and so on. And I even shared it with Alex. And now the same researchers decided to launch their own mobile phone carrier because they realized that the Verizons of the world were necessarily interested in decoupling it. So in that sense, and we ended up sharing the article on social media, sharing it with the rest of the community. So if I'm being honest, the more negative aspects of the technology is usually covered by the larger organizations because the conversation about data privacy picks up. But I think we definitely also need to be part of the conversation. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is also, it really differs between geographies. As somebody who comes from India, I know the conversation about data privacy is not on the top priority for most people. Because fundamentally, it's more the do good and hope that they don't do evil part of it, and the benefit that people see from technology that drives the conversation rather than what can go wrong.
I think it's super important to have like people who are optimists as well about technology, about the future. I feel like sometimes it's very easy to kind of, you know, throw your arms up and be like, what's the point? Like there's global warming and inflation and COVID and all that stuff. And I do think it's really important to have people who are very vocal about like the benefits. And even if things are definitely not just good all the time, I do think being able to convey optimism towards the future and get people excited about technology and about the future is like super important as well. I still just wanted to ask the question about like, have you guys thought about it? And it's very interesting to hear your thought on that. I think it is really important to have like the way you talk about it, Alex, about like, no, I'm just like a super interested in the tech and I want to talk about that makes a lot of sense. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I guess we never really spoke about what can go wrong with location. I mean, once or twice maybe because I'm more interested in it and I keep sharing articles, but it was never like a full-blown conversation like, oh my God, we have to stop sharing data or something like this.
Yeah, I'm ignoring it when you talk about this.
Yeah.
Because I'm just so fascinated about the technology itself. And somehow I'm a life optimist always, and I always think about the good that can come out of it. Maybe I'm too optimistic sometimes, but yeah, I cannot change this nature.
That's one of the reasons why this partnership works so well, because usually Alex is the more everything will work out, and I'm the one who can already point out 10 things that can go wrong. So in the end, we balance each other out.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. If there's other things like what makes you guys working together so good. I feel like that's one element. But if you guys have been working for a decade together, like there's got to be more as well.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Hard to say, right? But one thing that I can tell you, Maxime, if you are thinking about doing this for longer, it's better to do it in duo than doing it in solo, because I mean it's really I think that it's really amazing that we talk with Muthu twice a week, 7 a.m. Before breakfast, and we discuss all of the ideas and we are critical. And I mean, we would love to always do more, but then we've got time limitations and we are not able to complete things. But being able to actually discuss your ideas with someone who can critically tell that you're wrong or right, or that he believes that it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, I think that this is really one of key factors why we are doing this for such a long time. And I know that I know that Muthu will be always transparent with me, and no, and he will give me the right level of criticism or support when it's needed, and also the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also the fact that we've got fundamentally, I think if somebody else were to listen to our conversations, they would be surprised how often we disagree with each other. It's not always that we have the same ideas. It's not always the same that we have the same way of how we should approach things. But what it also very often was that when we disagreed with a proposal that made the conversation better. That was one aspect, and I've learned a lot from Alex. I mean, he's the senior in the partnership, and he's got more work experience as well. That's a polite way of telling he's older than me. That's one aspect of it, and the other aspect of it is, I guess, we also have, complementary set of skill sets. Sometimes Alex is the more visionary who comes up with a crazy idea that may or may not work, and other times it's just me who writes an email to NASA just because, why not, what can go wrong, and then you get a response from them. So yeah, in that sense, it's a very complementary sinusoidal relationship where one ebbs and the other flows, and the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, it's also about life situations, for example, right? So, I mean, when one of us has, I don't know, like in my case, little baby at home to focus on, or wedding, like in case of Muthu, or I don't know, moving to a new city, or switching jobs, or doing all the other things that take a lot of time, and you cannot focus for a month or 2 months or a couple of months on the blog, then the other one is covering, which is also something really important when you are doing this just after hours.
But I have to admit, it kind of feels strange to be talking about the partnership because it's not something I think on a regular basis. So it's when you have to vocalize it, it feels strange because it just comes naturally.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's a good sign, like when it just works between you guys.
Yeah. I guess that's for sure. At least that's how I feel. And I'm pretty sure Alex has a list of complaints that we need to discuss about later on.
But we don't have 10 hours to go.
Precisely.
Let me ask you guys about like the state of social media and media, I guess, in general these days. Like, do you guys think about like how TikTok is huge, for example, now, and how YouTube is the second biggest search engine? Did you guys think about these things?
Let me comment on the TikTok thing, because I'm actually too old for this. So I don't have TikTok, and I've never seen a TikTok video in my life, which makes it well, I'm not proud of it, because we are probably losing a channel to get to some young people that could benefit from it. But it's also about focus. So each social media channel takes, I don't know, 15 minutes or 20 minutes of your time. If you've got 2 hours to spend on it every day, or 1 hour to spend on it every day, you need to be wise about your choice and think about this consciously. I'm just talking from like purely technical perspective of the challenges that we have with Muthu. So we try to focus more. So, for example, using LinkedIn to get to the professional community. We want to use more video content and generate more video content, which is an ongoing process we are working on. But I see, for example, how I lost my interest in Twitter over the course of the past year or two, and I've transitioned myself to be more LinkedIn user, because I see just much more valuable content over there. But it also starts to be a little bit like it's that there is a bit too much content mess happening there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenging question and challenging task to manage it well, but I think that we are slowly starting to understand how things work. So, for example, what is the lifespan of a post on Twitter versus lifespan of a post on LinkedIn, and try to plan some kind of a strategy around this, because at the end, what we want to do is we want our message to get to people. We don't want to spam. We really want to reach the right audience, and if we've got something valuable to share, we want people to learn about this.
When you asked the question, I was smiling like a 15-year-old teenager, and the reason was when Twitter was becoming big and we started our Twitter account. I think Alex probably hated me for a bit of time because I could not stop talking about Twitter and how awesome it was. And I could not for the life of me understand why we should be maintaining a newsletter. Because at that time I told him, emails are dead. Nobody's going to use it in a couple of years from now. Let's just go all in on Twitter and forget about emails. I think it's been 5-6 years since we had this conversation, and I'm the one now who's maintaining the newsletter, and I'm the one who's sending out the newsletters, even though I still take care of Twitter as well, fundamentally, because if we're being honest, most of these social media, including TikTok, they're not designed around retaining your attention on a topic. They're designed around keeping you entertained, and attention spans are shorter and shorter. Yesterday, someone told me that the average attention span is now 2.4 seconds. And I was not sure if we are still talking about humans or goldfish, but that's where we are. Whereas, so essentially, the newsletter that we have is still the best way we reach the audience. It still has a much higher engagement rate than the other medium as well. And it's the same for me as well. I mean, I'm starting to consume more and more of my information through newsletters from other organizations, regardless of whether that's The Wired, because they've got a bunch of newsletters when you subscribe and pay for their service, or whether it's other geospatial newsletters. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is, I guess, the platform itself evolves through time, right? I mean, Alex and I, we're getting older, if I can put the emphasis on the R. And that also kind of means that we're not going to be necessarily interested in TikTok, which would have been the case 5 years ago, for me at least. And Alex couldn't be bothered about Twitter even back then. But yeah, why not? If you want to do TikTok videos, if that's the way to reach an audience, I guess we should look into it. But I don't know. At some point, you get a bit, let's say, platform independent, and you become more focused on what you want to say.
I like that notion of focus, about like not trying to spread yourself too thin and jumping on the next thing. On that, do you guys have like advice for younger people? Because like you guys like are visible online and you have a presence online. Do you have advice for like you mentioned students are a big target audience that you're trying to go for? Like specifically in geospatial, for example, like what do you think, people that are coming out of school today, do you think they should be present online? How do you think about that? What would you tell them?
I think Alex has to take it in order of seniority, right?
Thank you. Age before beauty. I can comment on this because I'm actually recruiting quite a lot of people to my team, and there are a couple of things that are important, right? And it's to show that you are not an average person, to show that you are passionate about the things that you're gonna do at your work, to show that you are doing something extra or something extraordinary. So to show that you've been, for example, writing articles on LinkedIn, or writing at Geoawesomeness, or I don't know, doing some video tutorials, or perhaps doing some volunteering projects in one of the humanitarian organizations that we spoke about, or at university. This is something that really matter. And we had a lot of examples, a lot of cases of people that used Geoawesomeness to get specific job position, and they've realized the goal, and then they probably stopped contributing that much to the blog, which is fine, because I mean, as long as you've got something important to say, it's important for you to actually convey this message. And if you're gonna use it for good, it's for your own purpose, it's still fine. But my personal example of how I've been using the blog for the benefit of my career at different levels at the beginning, but also then becoming a manager and so on. I think that at any stage of your career, it actually matters to do something extra, to show that you can independently think. I think that it's really, really important.
I have a slightly different viewpoint than Alex does on this. And I think my thinking on this has evolved a bit over the years. So first and foremost, Geoawesomeness has been, let's say, transformative for me in my career. The current job that I have at Deutsche Bahn, the recruiter who wrote me found me, or at least wrote me because she also mentioned a couple of the articles that I have written and so on and so forth. So in that sense, it's definitely been useful. And I don't necessarily think that writing or podcasting or creating videos is only a way to showcase that you are doing something extra or extraordinary. Fundamentally, and I think this is important regardless of where you are in your career, and more so when you are a younger professional, is that the more people that you know, the more information that you can process, the better decisions that you can make, right? The more connections you have, the more inspirations you will get, the more avenues for opportunities that you can actually see. Because if you are living in your city and you only interact with the few people that are around you, then the number of ideas that you have are essentially limited, unless you are having an IQ that's beyond the average, which is certainly not the case for me. Which means that the only way that I'm going to get better at it is through the collective knowledge of other people, through having interactions with different people. And I think when you have a blog, when you have a podcast, when you have a video series, then it gives you a reason, gives you an excuse to reach out to other people and to have conversations that you perhaps would not be able to have otherwise. And that's the underrepresented aspect of being present online. It's it could be something as simple as having a newsletter where you curate the top 5 news stories of the week. You're not necessarily writing something new, but you're creating value, which means that then you have an excuse to talk to someone else in the industry just to get their opinion. And in this sense, that's really amazing, because the more people you interact with, and there are really smart people that you surround yourself with, the better your own ideas and decision making are going to get. I've benefited immensely from that. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. I think networking is really important, not just for the sake of it, but to keep your eyes and your ears open and to absorb as much as information possible. And if blogging, writing, creating content is going to give you an excuse and going to give you an advantage to talk to other people, then you should be taking it. And the other day I was having a conversation from a colleague from the geospatial industry who does it really, really well, even much better than me. And she was surprised how often people are afraid just to reach out to others and to say, hey, I'm XYZ and I'm working on this. I just need 10 minutes of your time. She was just describing how she approaches it, which is basically, I'm XYZ and I have something that I want to discuss with you. Do you have 10 minutes? Okay, you write 100 people, 10 people might respond, but that's still 10 people that you would have normally not spoken to. 10 people whose collective knowledge that you benefit from. And that's something quite valuable. Even my regular interactions with Alex, that's what I mean when I say he spots trends, if I'm not able to do it, but someone else is able to do it on a regular basis, but then I benefit from that knowledge. No, I'm not doing anything additional. And it's the same with the conversations that I have had with people like Dennis. She's really amazing. Her network is so huge, but because I get to talk to her on a regular basis, but then I also see the data ethics side of things, or the difficulties with location privacy and things like this, which I don't normally think about on my own. So essentially this opens up a wide variety of possibilities, because then you spot career opportunities that you may not otherwise spot. So even if you have the best search engine in the world, you still need to know what the information is telling you, and people are the best way to do that.
And if people don't know where to go, Geoawesomeness is a great place to start.
That's the difference between a professional content creator like yourself, Maxime, and me, because I would have not probably thought about it.
I think that's a nice place to start rounding it off. But before that, I do like asking people for books that they like reading, or for podcasts, because I think it's pretty interesting. Like you get to understand people a little bit better, and I think it's very on the topic. Like books and podcasts are pretty hard to discover. A lot of it is through word of mouth. So if maybe there's like a book and a podcast each that you would recommend people take a look at. It doesn't have to be anything about geospatial, just something that you think is valuable and worth checking out.
Okay, let me go first, because I love reading and I'm always looking out for books to read. At any given point of time, I at least have 2 or 3 of them lying around the house and that I'm reading on the same time. But if I have to recommend one book, I guess right now the book that I would recommend is a book called 4,000 Weeks. That one was kind of interesting for several reasons, but fundamentally because it, Alex was mentioning it earlier, that the biggest difficulty we have is time. And this kind of helped me accept the fact that we're not going to be able to do everything. But whatever we do, it should be a conscious decision to do it. And it's a really beautiful book. And I think that would be one book that I would recommend.
I've
Podcasts.
been recommending that one a lot to pretty much everybody who listens to me talk about it. I can't really shut up about it. So it's a great book.
It's a really great book. I completely agree with you. And maybe another one, since you kind of hijacked it and said it's also a favorite of yours. It's
Go ahead.
It's a book called Peak Performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice for a variety of reasons, but as people who are not professional athletes, we tend to downplay the importance of rest. We tend to downplay the importance of taking a break, even if you are in the zone, even if you are really, really productive. And peak performance, I think it was useful in that sense, because I mean it's a whole lot more, but it gives you the viewpoint also from professional athletes and so on. So that's maybe another one that I would recommend right from the top of my mind. Right, in terms of podcasts, of course, I guess I should recommend Mind Behind the Maps, but that's kind of a bit idiotic, because if people are not not listening to this conversation, they're not going to be probably listening to it in the first place. It doesn't matter if I recommend it or not. But a podcast that I really like, and it has nothing to do with the geospatial industry, is a podcast called The Rational Reminder. It's two Canadians talking about finance and interviewing people who have absolutely nothing to do with finance. So psychologists, economists, and all of those things. So if you want to, understand personal finance better and understand the psychology behind it and all of those things, that's a really nice podcast to check out.
Great. Alex?
So when it comes to books, I can surely recommend you tons of kids' books, because this is what I read.
Let's do it.
Every evening. But one of the books that really transformed my way that I think about managing teams and being a better leader is No Rules, from the CEO of Netflix.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't agree with all of the things that he mentions, sure, but there are a couple of things that are really true, like the culture of giving feedback, or the key goal that you should have in your team to actually have the high concentration of talents. It changed the way that I started to think about like building and assembling also my teams at work, which is I recommend anyone really reading this book. When it comes to podcasts, I will actually share with you how I started to listen to podcasts maybe a couple of months ago. Of course, I've got my go-to podcasts about geospatial and drone technologies. There are not too many of those, so I mean, probably a lot of people who listen to this podcast would also follow the others. But one thing that I've noticed is that I actually look for specific topics and look for podcasts that have discussions with people from specific companies or talking about specific topics. So it's interesting that it actually what I do with YouTube, and we've been talking about this, that podcasts starts to be a similar thing. I look for interesting conversations regarding a specific topic, and sometimes it doesn't really matter where I find it. What matters is the topic that is discussed and people who a specific podcaster is talking to, which I find it. I think that it's interesting that it will probably the way that people will start consuming podcasts as well. This will be just a very good source of information about a given topic.
Yeah, I guess we really didn't talk about like how people, you don't just show up and make stuff. You need people to find it as well. It's not necessarily a topic we went into that much, but yeah, it's fun. Like YouTube is actually like the biggest podcasting platform at the moment, bigger than Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So that whole landscape is also changing. But it outside of geospatial, is there like a specific, maybe even an episode? Actually, it doesn't have to be a whole podcast, but is there something that you would recommend people check out?
I actually have a podcast that I listen to regularly, but it's a Polish one.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it will be meaningful for you guys, but it's called Dział Zagraniczny
You're gonna have to
in
send me
my
that.
language. Exactly. And I mean, it's a guy that discusses global political and social and economic challenges from countries that you would normally not hear about in the media. Africa, Oceania, Latin America.
Yeah, if you can send me that, we'll. So I know there's some people from Poland who listen, so we'll put that for
Absolutely
for those.
Alex and his family, I guess. Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much for coming here, spending some of your valuable time with me, and telling me a little bit about how you've been building Geoawesomeness. It's been really nice. As I said, I have a lot of respect for what you guys have been building and doing. And just, I think I realized like not that long ago that you guys had been going on for so long. And that is definitely an inspiration as well. So thanks for the chat.
The pleasure is all ours.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I hope that we'll have a chance to cover on the blog 10th anniversary of Minds Behind Maps podcast. So I mean, I'm a big fan, and really meaningful conversations that you have with also very interesting people, right? And this is what makes this podcast better than all the others out there. The selection of guests that you have. Yeah, so really great job, and hope to see more podcasts coming.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that the fun thing is actually like I started the podcast. I realized that after, but not very far away from your 10-year of when Geoawesomeness started. So I feel like if we celebrate the 10 years of Minds Behind Maps, that's probably going to coincide with the 20 years of Geoawesomeness, which sounds like a pretty cool thing to celebrate.
Looking forward to that. I mean, we can have a joint party somewhere in the
yeah,
Netherlands.
my calendar is pretty open for like right now. I don't have much booked, so I feel like that's all right.
Okay, good to know. I mean, since I've been living in Germany, I've kind of gotten used to planning things in advance. So if we're talking 2030, it should be fine.
Yeah, put it in your calendar.
You would be surprised.
Guys, thank you very much for the chat.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
If you found this conversation valuable, I'd like to ask if you could consider reviewing this podcast, either on Apple Podcast or on Spotify if you're listening to the podcast. You can also head to mindsbehindmaps.com. There's a section to leave a review there. The reason I ask that is because it lets other people know that this show is worth listening to, but it also helps me make a better case when I want to reach out to specific guests. I can point to that and be, look, some people find these conversations really interesting. This is worth your time. If you're on YouTube, I'd appreciate if you could also let me know what you think about these conversations, what you found useful about them, and maybe what I can improve about it. Either way, thank you very much for listening. I hope to catch you next time. Cheers.